Daniel's little girl threw another tantrum, prompting him to publicly propose the dissolution of our engagement at my birthday banquet, declaring, "The little girl I raised cannot accept you." I gazed at the large diamond ring on my finger, placed there by Daniel's archrival, and nodded, "Oh." I overheard his band of unscrupulous friends wagering, "Do you believe that after the banquet, Miss Cecilia will collapse in tears and plead with Daniel not to forsake her?" Daniel, brimming with inexplicable confidence, proclaimed, "She loves me to death." Indeed, I cried after the banquet, but it was due to Daniel's archrival. My 25th birthday banquet was hosted at the Mou family's hillside villa, adorned with 3,000 champagne roses entwining the Roman columns to the fountain's edge, illuminated by the radiant gleam of crystal chandeliers. I stood beside the champagne tower, fingertips lightly tapping the glass, my eyes surveying the room filled with guests, business tycoons, heirs of prominent families, and even a few familiar faces from the entertainment industry. "Miss Cecilia, your earring is loose," the makeup artist whispered. I tilted my head slightly, allowing her to adjust the diamond pendant on my earlobe, the mirror reflecting my ensemble, a Valentino haute couture red gown, slightly curled black hair cascading down, and blood-red lips strikingly beautiful and bold. "Hasn't Daniel arrived yet?" the makeup artist inquired cautiously. I chuckled softly, "He'd better never show up." No sooner had I spoken than a commotion erupted at the entrance. Daniel finally arrived, fashionably late, with a girl in a white dress on his arm, dressed in a burgundy suit with a loosely draped tie, exuding the demeanor of a carefree young master. Beside him stood Vivian, a girl with long, straight black hair and makeup so subtle it was nearly transparent, timidly retreating behind him like a startled little rabbit, instantly drawing the attention of the entire room. "TSK, has Daniel brought his new paramour?" Kitty, heiress of the Zhou group, whispered playfully in my ear. I sipped my champagne, my expression unaltered, "Who knows?" Daniel, arm around Vivian's waist, strode toward me, his face bearing a smug expression intent on humiliating me. "Cecilia," he announced loudly, ensuring everyone could hear, "allow me to introduce Vivian." Vivian, head bowed, murmured faintly, "Hello, Miss Cecilia." I cast her an indifferent glance and remained silent. Daniel continued his theatrics, "Vivian is too pure to tolerate your high-handed temperament, so we—" He paused, then raised his voice, "are canceling the engagement." The room fell silent in an instant, the band ceasing its performance, all eyes fixed upon me, anticipating the Mou family heiress's loss of composure. I swirled my champagne glass, a faint smile on my lips, convenient, it saves me the trouble of saying it. I turned back to converse with Kitty, as if I had merely heard an inconsequential remark. Daniel was dumbfounded, clearly unprepared for my response devoid of hysterics, tears, or even a furrowed brow. Vivian lifted her head, a flicker of astonishment in her eyes. "Cecilia." Daniel raised his voice, "Did you hear me?" I said the engagement is off. I leisurely sipped my drink before meeting his gaze, "I heard you." "Anything else?" His face flushed red, visibly provoked by my demeanor. "Stop pretending to be so calm. I know you're hurting inside." I couldn't suppress a laugh. "Daniel, don't you think too highly of yourself?" "Daniel." Vivian tugged at his sleeve, her eyes brimming with tears. "Don't do this, Miss Cecilia must be devastated." I raised an eyebrow. "Miss Vivian, rein in those tears, your makeup's about to run." Her expression stiffened. At that moment, the butler wheeled in a 5-tiered cake. "Miss, it's time to cut the cake." I gracefully set down my glass, picked up the cake knife, and entirely disregarded Daniel and Vivian standing nearby. The guests exchanged glances but soon resumed their lively chatter, for no one would risk offending the Su family over a Mou family matter. After cutting the cake, I turned to leave, catching a glimpse of a figure in the corner from the edge of my vision. Soren, leaning against a Roman column in a sharply tailored black suit, an unlit cigarette between his fingers, observing me with a faint, ambiguous smile. Our eyes met for a second, his lips curved slightly, a dangerous glint flickering in his gaze. After the banquet, I stood alone on the terrace for some air. "Impressive performance," a deep voice sounded behind me, followed by a glass of whiskey offered my way. I accepted it without turning. "Does Daniel genuinely believe I'm feigning composure?" Soren stepped beside me, his suit jacket shed, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal toned forearms. His friends were betting just now, he remarked with a playful tone, that within 3 days, you'd be weeping and begging for reconciliation. I scoffed, then they're likely to lose everything they own. Soren turned his head to look at me, his gaze profound. Are you truly not upset at all? I faced him, my fingers brushing his tie and giving it a gentle tug. What do you think? He let out a low chuckle, grasped the back of my head, and kissed me a kiss infused with the rich aroma of whiskey and a faint hint of tobacco, commanding yet tender. As we parted, his thumb grazed the corner of my lips. Happy birthday, Miss Cecilia. I smiled. And the gift? He retrieved a velvet box from his pocket, revealing an antique letter opener with a ruby-encrusted handle. I raised an eyebrow. The one from the auction 3 months ago? I noticed how much you wanted it, he replied lazily, so I bought it. I took the letter opener, my fingertips tracing its sharp blade. Is Soren suggesting I use this to dispatch a scoundrel? He chuckled. No, it's for unwrapping gifts. After a pause, he added, like unwrapping me, for instance. I looked up at him. That depends on whether Soren's gift is worth my personal effort to unwrap. He promptly pressed me against the railing and kissed me again. 3 days after the banquet, Vivian's declaration of true love had flooded social media. A photo of her with Daniel captioned, "True love is blameless, thank fate for letting me meet you, Daniel," accompanied by comments like "so sweet" and "courageously pursuing love." I reclined on the terrace of my private villa, leisurely scrolling through my phone, and with a light swipe of my finger, I liked the post. The next second, my phone was snatched away. "You seem quite relaxed," Soren said, standing behind me, his suit jacket casually slung over his shoulder, shirt collar slightly open to reveal a fresh scratch on his collarbone. I lazily raised my eyes. What, is Soren jealous? He leaned down, one hand braced on the armrest of my lounge chair, the other pinching my chin, his thumb rubbing my lips. If I were jealous, would you still be lying here playing with your phone? I chuckled, my fingertips tugging his tie downward. Then what does Soren want me to do? As he leaned in to kiss me, my phone suddenly buzzed. It was a call from Daniel. Soren glanced at the screen, sneered, and pressed speakerphone. Cecilia, Daniel's voice carried a condescending tone of charity. You liked Vivian's post, do you regret it now? I nearly burst out laughing. Soren pinched my waist, signaling me to play along. I adjusted my tone, infusing it with a hint of melancholy. You're overthinking it. Daniel immediately grew smug. Stop pretending, I know you're upset. Vivian's very forgiving. If you apologize, she won't hold it against you. I rolled my eyes but kept my voice soft. Daniel, is there really no chance for us anymore? From the other end, Daniel's voice turned gleeful. Cecilia, you're finally yielding? If only you'd done this sooner. But now. He paused deliberately. You'll need to apologize to Vivian first, since your attitude that day was deplorable. I smirked silently, my fingertips tracing circles on Soren's chest, though my tone remained aggrieved. All right, I'll consider it. After hanging up, Soren lifted me from the lounge chair, pinning me against the floor-to-ceiling window, his voice laced with danger. If you keep acting, I might just kill him. I wrapped my arms around his neck, laughing freely. No, killing him outright wouldn't be any fun. The next day, Vivian updated her social media with a video, clad in a pure white dress, her eyes red-rimmed, speaking feebly to the camera. I hope everyone refrains from attacking Miss Cecilia, she just loves Daniel too much. Beneath the video, comments abounded. Vivian is so kind, Cecilia, that spoiled heiress, deserved to be dumped. I sat in the car, watching it, unable to stifle a scoff. From the driver's seat, Soren rested one hand on the steering wheel, the other pinching the back of my neck. What, planning to deal with her? I tilted my head with a smile. No rush, let her flounder a few more days. That evening, at an upscale club, I encountered Daniel and Vivian. Upon seeing me, Vivian immediately shrank into Daniel's arms, whispering, Daniel, let's go, Miss Cecilia probably doesn't want to see me. Daniel held her tightly, glaring at me. Cecilia, are you stalking us? I swirled my glass and chuckled. This club belongs to a friend, I'm here for a drink. Is that an issue? Daniel frowned, visibly skeptical. Vivian tugged his sleeve, her voice sugary. Daniel, don't be like that. Miss Cecilia must be heartbroken to come here. I set down my glass, approached her slowly, leaned in, and whispered so only she could hear, Vivian, your acting skills are wasted outside of show business. Her face froze. I straightened up, flashed Daniel a smile, rest assured, I won't cling to you, and then turned to leave. 10 minutes later, in the club's VIP lounge, Soren pressed me onto the sofa, fingers gripping my chin, his eyes intense. Had your fill of fun? I grinned provocatively. What, jealous again, Soren? He chuckled lowly, kissing me, his voice muffled against my lips. Yes, so tonight, you're in charge of dousing the flames. The next day, Vivian posted another update, a photo of her leaning on Daniel's shoulder, captioned, some people are destined to be mere passers-by. When I scrolled to this post, I was nestled in Soren's arms. He glanced at the screen and sneered, shall we go public now? I shook my head, smiling languidly, what's the hurry? Let them revel a few more days. Soren pinched my chin, his voice husky, Cecilia, you're truly. I kissed him, silencing the rest of his words. Vivian's theatrics intensified. She anonymously posted in the socialite group, I hear Cecilia's still pestering Daniel privately, how pitiful, unable to let go after being dumped. The accompanying image was a blurry silhouette of me standing by the window of an upscale restaurant, head bowed over my phone, the interplay of light and shadow lending my profile a melancholic air. The group erupted instantly, true or false? Isn't Cecilia always so haughty? Hilarious, she acted so composed, but it was all a facade. Vivian, watch out, these heiresses are masters of backstabbing. Vivian replied with a wronged emoji, please don't say that, Miss Cecilia just loves Daniel too much. I scrolled through the messages, fingertips tapping the screen, a slight smirk on my lips. That photo was one I deliberately took 2 days prior near Daniel's company. My phone buzzed with a message from Soren, ? I replied with a cat tilting head emoji, ? He called immediately, his voice low and dangerously magnetic, Cecilia, keep up this affectionate act, and you won't leave bed tonight. I chuckled, is Soren threatening me? It's a notice, came the sound of a lighter flicking on the other end, and I could almost picture him reclining on a leather sofa, shirt collar slightly undone. See you tonight, I softened my voice deliberately, don't forget that 85 Lafayette. He chuckled lowly and hung up. That evening, at the charity gala, I wore a dark green velvet gown with a cutout waist design accentuating my snow-white skin, diamond earrings swaying lightly with my steps, unwittingly drawing every eye in the room. Vivian and Daniel were present too, she in a white gauze dress, long black hair cascading over her shoulders, makeup so faint she resembled a delicate flower trembling in the breeze. Daniel, arm around her waist, wore a triumphant smile, as if flaunting to the crowd, see, no matter how stunning Cecilia is, she's still lost to my Vivian. Miss Cecilia, Vivian approached, champagne in hand, her gaze timid, what a coincidence. I swirled my glass, offering no response. She bit her lip, eyes reddening again, those messages in the group weren't from me, please don't misunderstand. Is that so? I chuckled, then why post anonymously only to reply with your main account, don't say that about Miss Cecilia? Your acting's commendable. Her face stiffened. At that moment, a waiter passed with a tray, and Vivian accidentally bumped its splash. An entire glass of red wine spilled onto my skirt, the dark red stain spreading instantly. Oh. I'm so sorry. Vivian fumbled for tissues, her voice tearful, it wasn't on purpose, Miss Cecilia, All eyes turned toward us. Daniel strode over, frowning at me, Cecilia, Vivian's apologized, don't make a face. I glanced down at my skirt and suddenly smiled. I raised a hand, gently brushing Vivian's cheek, whispering in her ear, the dress is yours, after all. I paused, my voice as light as a feather, it's fitting for a burial. Her pupils contracted sharply. I turned gracefully and exited. Half an hour later, in a private garage, the black Maybach's door had barely closed when Soren pressed me onto the seat, his fingertips rubbing the wine stain on my skirt, his gaze dark, she spilled it? I smiled lazily, what, Is Soren going to avenge me? More than that, he unbuttoned his suit with one hand, leaning down to bite my collarbone. Tonight, you'll repay it with interest. The car trembled slightly, the windows fogging up. The next morning, Vivian updated her social media. Some people shine on the surface but fuss over a mere dress behind the scenes. The photo showed her posing in my dark green dress, a small white flower photoshopped onto the hem, with the text, "Kindness cannot be feigned." Comments flooded in, "Vivian is so pure, Cecilia can't compare." He glanced at the screen and sneered, "Shall we eliminate her now?" I shook my head, fingertips circling his chest. "What's the rush? Let her prance a few more days." After a pause, I added, "Wait for Daniel's birthday banquet." Soren flipped over, pinning me down. "Cecilia, you're truly—" I kissed him, silencing the rest. Vivian had grown increasingly restless lately, hiring a private detective to tail me, aiming to unearth dirt to make Daniel despise me utterly. Unfortunately, her hire was inept, capturing only blurry silhouettes, photos of Soren and me kissing in the garage, dimly lit, revealing merely a tall man's outline. Yet, it sufficed for her purposes. Late at night in the Sue family villa, Vivian, clad in a white nightgown, stood barefoot on soft carpet, clutching those blurry photos, her eyes red as if afflicted with conjunctivitis, appearing grievously wronged. "Daniel," her voice broke, gently tugging his sleeve, "I didn't want to tell you, but, how could Miss Cecilia do this?" Daniel lounged on the sofa, sipping a drink, frowning at her words. "What's wrong?" Vivian bit her lip, tears teetering, trembling as she handed over the photos. I was worried Miss Cecilia might despair over the broken engagement, so I had someone keep an eye on her, and then... The photos depicted a dim garage where I was pressed against a car door by a man, locked in a deep kiss, my skirt disheveled, his hand gripping my waist with commanding possessiveness. Daniel's face darkened instantly. Vivian seized the chance to embellish. "How could Miss Cecilia do this? Just days after the engagement ended, she's with another man." She sobbed. "Does she care about you at all?" Daniel slammed his glass on the table, liquor splashing everywhere. "Wretch," he gnashed his teeth, acting so virtuous, "yet she's been cheating behind my back all along." Vivian threw herself into his arms, her voice soft and pained. "Daniel, don't be angry. Miss Cecilia might have just been momentarily confused." Daniel held her tightly, his tone icy. "Vivian, rest assured, I won't let her off easily." Meanwhile, at Soren's private villa, I leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window, swirling a glass of red wine, listening to the live recording of Vivian and Daniel's conversation through my earpiece. Soren encircled my waist from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder, voice husky. "She's quite the storyteller." I chuckled, and Daniel actually bought it. "He's a fool." Soren's hand slid along my waist, his tone menacing. "But she dares to slander you." I turned, pressing a fingertip to his lips. "What's the rush? Let her perform a bit longer." He pinned me against the glass, voice hoarse. "Cecilia, enjoying yourself, are you?" I grinned provocatively. "I'd enjoy it more if you came to me." He leaned down, biting my earlobe. "Then let's enjoy tonight together." The next day, Daniel took action, anonymously posting in the socialite group, "Cecilia pretends to be pure on the surface but plays wild in private." Attached was that blurry garage photo. The group exploded. "What the hell? Is this Cecilia? Hooking up with someone just days after the breakup? TSK, looks like Daniel was right to ditch her." Vivian chimed in opportunely with a wronged emoji. "Please don't say that. Miss Cecilia might have just acted impulsively." I scrolled through the messages, a faint smirk on my lips. The fish had bitten. My phone buzzed with Soren's message. "I'm angry." I replied, "Wait a bit." He called, his voice low and perilous. "Cecilia, my patience has limits." I chuckled. "Soren, why rush? The show's just beginning." After a 2-second silence, he laughed, voice raspy. "Tonight, I'll collect interest." That evening, at Daniel's birthday banquet, Vivian donned a pristine white gown, makeup impeccable, clinging to Daniel's arm with a gentle, smug smile. I arrived fashionably late. In a red dress, lips blood red, the sharp clack of my heels on the marble floor silenced the room instantly. Daniel glared at me coldly. Cecilia, you dare show up? I swirled my glass and chuckled, why wouldn't I? Vivian spoke timidly, Miss Cecilia, those photos. I raised an eyebrow, what photos? Daniel sneered, drop the act. The photos of you messing around with some guy in the garage everyone in the city knows. I sipped my drink leisurely and smiled, Daniel, are you certain it's me? He froze. I pulled out my phone and played a video Vivian negotiating with a private detective, her voice clear, use any means necessary to get dirt on Cecilia. Next came the detective's voice, Miss Vivian, these photos are too blurry, the face isn't visible. Vivian sneered, if it's unclear, edit it. I want Daniel to utterly loathe her. The room erupted in shock. Vivian paled, this is fake. Cecilia fabricated it. I chuckled, playing another recording Vivian's coy voice, Daniel, Cecilia must have been with someone else long ago, she's unworthy of you. Daniel whipped his head around, staring at Vivian in disbelief. She panicked, tears spilling instantly, Daniel, let me explain. I set down my glass gracefully, red lips curving, Miss Vivian, your acting's impressive, but alas. I paused, chuckling, too foolish. With that, I turned and left. Half an hour later, in the garage, the black Maybach's door had just shut when Soren pinned me to the seat, his voice menacing, had enough fun? Is Soren pleased? He bit my lip, not pleased. So. My voice dissolved into a fervent kiss. After Vivian's scandal broke, Daniel laid low for a few days, though evidently, his mind remained clouded. 3 days later, at Moo Group headquarters, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when my assistant knocked, expression odd, Cecilia, Daniel's downstairs, saying, he has urgent business with you. Without looking up, I said, tell him to scram. The assistant hesitated, he says if you won't see him, he'll wait indefinitely. I sneered, closing the file, fine, let's hear what nonsense he spouts. In the first floor lounge, Daniel sat in a suit on the sofa, rising eagerly as I entered, his face bearing a patronizing smile, Cecilia, you've finally agreed to see me. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, speak quickly. He frowned, displeased with my demeanor, yet maintained decorum, I know you're still upset, but there are matters we must clarify. I raised an eyebrow, oh? He took a deep breath, as if resolving something momentous, regarding Vivian. I can understand your feelings. I nearly laughed, understand what? You're jealous of her, he asserted confidently, you exposed those recordings because you can't let me go. I gazed at him silently, struck by the sheer absurdity. Seeing my silence, Daniel assumed he'd struck a chord, growing bolder, actually, I can offer you a chance. What chance? He stepped forward, eyes burning, if you can accept Vivian, I might consider staying with you. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard, what? Of course, you'd need to apologize to Vivian first, he added magnanimously, since you humiliated her. I stared at him for 3 seconds before bursting into laughter. Daniel frowned, what's so funny? I wiped tears of laughter from my eyes, shaking my head, Daniel, I often wonder. I paused, red lips curling, is your confidence hereditary? His face darkened instantly, Cecilia. Don't be ungrateful. I sauntered to the sofa and sat, legs crossed, fingertips tapping the armrest, let's unpack your logic. You brought your mistress to my birthday banquet to end our engagement, she hired someone to spy on and slander me, and now you expect me to accept her and apologize? Daniel retorted righteously, Vivian was just confused. She loves me too much, that's why she did it. And you, he gazed at me fervently, all this fuss is just to get my attention, right? Cecilia, admit it, you still love me. I looked at him quietly, finding it utterly laughable. How had I ever been engaged to such a fool? Daniel, I stood, looking down at him, do you know why I haven't touched you all this time? He froze. I chuckled, because watching you blunder is far more entertaining than a circus. With that, I headed for the door. Daniel seized my wrist, Cecilia. Stop pretending. I know you. Before he finished, the lounge door swung open abruptly. Soren stood in the doorway in a black suit, his gaze falling on Daniel's grip on my hand, eyes turning frigid. Daniel released me instinctively. Soren? What are you doing here? Soren didn't spare him a glance, walking straight to me, voice low, the meeting's about to start. I naturally linked my arm with his. Let's go. Daniel's eyes widened. You too. Only then did Soren glance at him, tone detached. Does Daniel have something to say? And nothing. Daniel stammered. I just came to discuss some personal matters with Cecilia. Soren's lips curved, a smile not reaching his eyes. Finished? Yes, I chuckled, looking up at Daniel. By the way, what was Daniel saying earlier? That I should accept Vivian? Soren raised an eyebrow. Oh? I tilted my head, smiling innocently. I said, pausing, then enunciating. Are you worthy? Daniel's face turned ashen. Soren chuckled softly, wrapping an arm around my waist as we left. Even as the elevator doors closed, I could hear Daniel smashing things in the lounge. In the elevator, Soren kept one hand in his pocket, the other pinching the back of my neck. Enjoying yourself? I leaned on his shoulder, laughing until it shook. It's all right, just a bit taxing on my intellect. He suddenly pressed me against the elevator mirror. Cecilia, I've held back for too long. So? He leaned in, breath hot. What do you think, darling? The elevator descended to the garage, the black Maybach's windows soon fogging up. Vivian had lost all restraint ever since Daniel's rebuff at my hands. Her antics escalated dramatically. At an upscale spa, I was resting with my eyes closed on a massage bed in the VIP room when the door burst open. Miss Cecilia, Vivian stood in the doorway in a white outfit, makeup pristine, lips a tender pink, resembling an innocuous little flower. I didn't open my eyes. Get out. Instead of leaving, she stepped inside, voice gentle. Miss Cecilia, let's talk. I lazily opened my eyes to look at her. Talk about what? How you hired someone to spy on me, or how you play the victim in front of Daniel. Vivian's expression flickered, but she quickly reverted to her pitiful look. Miss Cecilia, you misunderstand. I just what? I sat up, casually adjusting my robe's collar. Just love Daniel too much? She bit her lip, eyes instantly reddening. I know you don't like me, but Daniel and I truly love each other. I scoffed. Truly? Vivian took a step closer, lowering her voice. Cecilia, don't think you're secure just because you've latched onto Soren. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? I know about your relationship. She smiled smugly. What do you think the Chi family would say if this got out? I looked at her quietly, suddenly amused. Are you threatening me? I just want to coexist peacefully. She blinked. If you stay out of Daniel's life, I'll keep quiet. I stood, towering over her. Vivian, do you know your greatest flaw? She froze. You're too stupid, I chuckled. Who do you think Soren is? You, threaten him? Vivian's face turned deathly pale. I picked up my phone and played a recording. Vivian's voice rang out clearly. Use any means necessary to get dirt on Cecilia. Her eyes widened sharply. You surprised? I smiled. This VIP room at the spa I've booked it year-round. Every corner is wired with surveillance and audio. Vivian stumbled back, finally panicking. Cecilia. Don't do anything rash. I leisurely pocketed my phone. Relax, I won't expose it now. I paused, smiling sinisterly. I'll wait for Daniel's birthday banquet and play it publicly. Vivian completely broke down, shrieking as she lunged at me. You wretch. I sidestepped, and she crashed to the floor, her meticulously styled hair disheveled, makeup smeared, looking utterly deranged. Miss Vivian, I leaned down, whispering in her ear, next time you threaten someone, check if they hold leverage over you first. With that, I turned and left, her hysterical sobs echoing behind me. Half an hour later, at Soren's private villa, I stood barefoot on the plush carpet, swirling a glass of red wine, gazing at the night view beyond the floor-to-ceiling window. Behind me, Soren emerged from a shower, a towel wrapped around his waist, water droplets tracing the contours of his abs. Had your fun? He approached from behind, arms braced on the glass beside me, voice deep. I sipped my wine. It's all right. He lowered his head, damp hair brushing my neck. Vivian threatened you? I chuckled, said she'd expose our relationship. Soren chuckled lowly, his breath warm, she wouldn't dare. I turned, fingertips grazing his chest, so confident, Soren? He seized my hand, pressing it to the glass. Cecilia, do you realize how you look right now? He paused, voice hoarse, it makes me want to kill Daniel. I raised an eyebrow, why? Because he once had you, Soren grumbled, well I'm just your secret lover. I chuckled, tilting my head to kiss him, I'll give you a title. 3 days later, at Daniel's birthday banquet, Vivian appeared in full splendor, clad in a white dress, makeup flawless, arm linked with Daniel's, smiling tenderly yet smugly. I arrived late, in a red dress, lips blood red, the sharp click of my heels on the marble floor silencing the room instantly. Daniel's eyes lit up upon seeing me, swiftly dropping Vivian's hand to approach. Cecilia. You came. I swirled my glass and chuckled, happy birthday. His face flushed with excitement, I knew it. You still have me in your heart. Vivian stood aside, her expression sour. I glanced at her and smiled, Daniel, I have a gift for you. He beamed, what gift? I pulled out my phone and played a video. Vivian's voice rang out, use any means necessary to get dirt on Cecilia. Daniel froze, this. The video continued, the photos are too blurry? Then edit them. I want Daniel to despise her completely. The room gasped. Vivian paled, no, it's not true. Cecilia faked it. I played another recording. Vivian's voice, Daniel, Cecilia must have been with someone else ages ago, she's not worthy of you. Daniel spun around, staring at Vivian in disbelief, Vivian? Vivian panicked, tears falling, Daniel, let me explain. I set down my glass gracefully, Miss Vivian, fine acting, but sadly. I paused, chuckling, too foolish. Then I turned and left. Half an hour later, in the garage, as the black Maybach's door closed, Soren pinned me to the seat, satisfied? I grinned provocatively, is Soren? He bit my lip, not yet. So. My voice melted into a searing kiss. After Daniel's banquet, rumors swirled in the circle. Some called Vivian a schemer, others deemed Daniel blind, but the most absurd claim was, Cecilia did all this to spite Daniel, originating from Daniel himself. At a golf club's VIP lounge, Daniel sat with legs crossed, swirling whiskey, boasting to his cronies, mark my words, within 3 days, Cecilia will come crawling to me. His friend young Master Wong scoffed, give it up, she's so close to Soren now, why would she care about you? What do you know? Daniel sneered, Soren's nothing. Cecilia's cozying up to him to make me jealous. The others exchanged looks. Think about it, Daniel grew more assured, why expose Vivian at my banquet? Why wear that red dress? Why humiliate me in front of everyone? He slammed the table, because she can't let me go. In the corner, Soren, fresh from a game, paused, a cold smirk on his lips. In the Moo Group CEO's office, I was reviewing files when my assistant knocked, looking uneasy, Cecilia, Daniel's here again. Without looking up, I said, tell him to get lost. He says, the assistant hesitated, if you won't see him, he'll shout downstairs. My pen paused, nearly laughing, shout what? The assistant awkwardly handed me a phone, this is a video security just took downstairs. In it, Daniel stood at the Moo Group entrance, holding red roses, shouting passionately at the building, Cecilia. I know you still love me. Stop pretending. I rubbed my temples, call the police. 5 minutes later, sirens blared through the street. That evening, at a private cocktail party, I wore a dark green velvet gown, chatting with business associates, when Daniel appeared, grabbing my wrist, Cecilia. Let's talk. The room hushed instantly. I coldly withdrew my hand, Daniel, behave. Stop pretending, he hissed, I know you're doing all this to get my attention. I raised an eyebrow, oh? Getting close to Soren, exposing Vivian, even calling the cops on me, he grew more fervent, it's all because you can't let me go. I gazed at him for 3 seconds, then smiled, Daniel, know what I admire most about you? He froze. This baseless confidence, I swirled my glass lightly, it's truly astounding. Soft laughter rippled around us. Daniel's face reddened. Cecilia. Stop being stubborn. Dare you say I'm not in your heart at all? Not a bit. Then why do you keep showing up around me? Because, I smiled, watching you flounder is one of my amusements. He clenched his fists. You. Daniel, a deep, magnetic voice sounded behind me. Soren appeared beside me, suit immaculate, eyes icy. Daniel faltered instantly. Soren. Soren didn't glance at him, wrapping an arm around my waist. Let's go, the dance is starting. I leaned into him naturally, casting Daniel a parting look. By the way, Daniel, see a psychiatrist. Delusions are a treatable condition. In the dance floor's center, Soren held my waist, swaying to the music. He's making a scene, and you're not mad, he murmured. I chuckled. Why bother with a fool? Soren replied, I do. The music surged, and he spun me, pressing me against the floor-to-ceiling window out of sight. I hooked my arms around his neck and kissed him. 3 days later, at a charity auction, Daniel arrived with Vivian again. She wore her usual white dress, makeup pristine, though her eyes were gloomier. Daniel maintained his I'm the handsomest swagger. Mid-auction, the host announced, the next item, donated by Miss Cecilia of the Moo Group, is the engagement ring Mr. Daniel gave her last year. The room buzzed. Daniel shot up. Cecilia. What's this about? I raised my paddle gracefully, starting bid, 1 yuan. Soren lazily bid, 1 million. Daniel's face darkened. You 2 million, I smiled, raising it. 3 million, Soren followed. 5 million. 10 million. Ultimately, Soren won the ring for 10 million yuan. The host asked excitedly, why did Soren bid for this ring? Soren toyed with it, lips curling, because. He dropped to one knee, presenting it to me amid gasps. Miss Cecilia, will you marry me? I raised an eyebrow. Isn't this someone else's engagement ring? That's irrelevant. His gaze deepened. What matters is, from now on, you're mine alone. The room screamed. In the corner, Daniel's face was ashen, Vivian clenching her palms so hard her nails drew blood. After the banquet, in the parking lot, Daniel blocked me. Cecilia. Are you insane? Soren's a player. He's been with more women than you've met. I chuckled. So? He'll never marry you. Daniel grabbed my shoulders. Only I truly love you. Let go, an icy voice came from behind. Soren appeared, seizing Daniel's wrist with bone-crushing force. Daniel paled in pain. Soren. Touch her again. Soren's voice was glacial, and I'll ensure you can't survive in the capital. He turned, arm around me, and walked off. Daniel's hysterical shouts followed. Cecilia. You'll regret this. You don't love him, you love me. I waved without looking back. Get a brain scan, Daniel. Inside the black Maybach, Soren pressed me to the seat. Satisfied? Soren was dashing today. He bit my lip. So, ready to keep your promise? What promise? Tonight, his fingers slid under my skirt. Don't plan on sleeping. The windows fogged up. Since Soren's public proposal, Vivian slithered like a snake with a trodden tail, biding her time in the shadows. Meanwhile, Daniel, that imbecile, posted on Facebook, some use even marriage to spite me. Cecilia, you're ruthless, with a moody 45-degree skyward gaze photo. I nearly spat out my morning coffee. 3 days later, at a private stables, I wore a black riding outfit, hair tied high, stroking my steed Thunder's mane. Soren stood nearby, in a white shirt and black breeches, his broad shoulders and narrow waist strikingly defined by sunlight. Vivian's been quiet lately, he handed me iced water, eyes darkening, something's off. I chuckled, she's plotting something big. Just then, a stir arose at the stable entrance. Vivian in white riding gear, long black hair loose, like an idle drama's pure heroine, with Daniel behind her, leading a horse, gazing at her adoringly. TSK, persistent pest, I mounted my horse, more annoying than flies. Soren pinched my calf, don't go too hard. Don't worry, I leaned down, pecking his lips, I'll leave some for you to handle. With a nudge, thunder bolted like an arrow. On the field, Vivian deliberately rode closer, voice frail, "Miss Cecilia, what a coincidence." I ignored her, spurring my horse faster. She persisted, "Miss Cecilia, your marriage to Soren, is it real?" I yanked the reins, my horse rearing high, nearly colliding with hers. Vivian shrieked, face blanching. "Vivian," I loomed over her, "follow me again, and next time it won't be just a scare." She bit her lip, eyes reddening instantly. "Miss Cecilia, you misunderstand." I just what?" I sneered, "Want to record again? Or accidentally knock me off?" Vivian's expression shifted, unprepared for my insight. Then Daniel galloped over. "Cecilia. Why are you bullying Vivian?" I rolled my eyes. "Donate your eyes if you won't use them." "You." Daniel's face turned livid. "Cecilia, I know you're jealous of Vivian, but you can't be so vicious." I nearly laughed. "Me? Jealous of her? Aren't you?" Daniel puffed his chest. "To get my attention, you staged this with Soren, and now target Vivian." He grew bolder. "Admit it, you still love me." I stared at him for 3 seconds, then rode closer, whispering in his ear, "Daniel, know what you and Vivian share?" "What?" "Equal stupidity." I cracked the whip and sped off, his furious roars trailing behind. In the VIP lounge, fresh from a shower, I saw Soren lounging on the sofa, toying with a tiny camera. "Found it in Vivian's saddlebag," he said, tone ominous. "She planned to film you falling." I approached, towel drying my hair. "That's her best move." Soren yanked me into his lap, my damp robe clinging to his shirt. "How to handle it?" I straddled him, fingertips tracing his Adam's apple. "Turn her own game against her?" He flipped me onto the sofa. "As you wish." An hour later, an accident struck. Vivian's horse spooked, hurling her into a mud pit. The self-proclaimed pure maiden was now mud-caked, half her false lashes gone, sobbing with ruined makeup. Even better, her saddlebag split, spilling its contents, a mini camera, my itinerary, and a packet of white powder later identified as laxatives. Daniel stood by, face grim. "Vivian, what are these?" Vivian panicked. "No, not mine. I'm framed." She pointed at me, shrieking, "It's Cecilia. It has to be." I crossed my arms, feigning innocence. "Miss Vivian, are you suggesting I knew you'd bring these items and staged this?" The watching socialites snickered. "Vivian, Kitty, the Joe heiress, mocked, even framing needs some logic, right?" Vivian's face was ashen. She lunged at Daniel. "Daniel. Believe me. I really." He stepped back instinctively, eyes conflicted. "Vivian, you." Then Soren wrapped an arm around my waist, turning. "Let's go. Too much filth harms the eyes." Inside the black Maybach, Soren loosened his tie, eyes dark. "That powder was meant for you." I leaned on his shoulder, figured. "She's courting death." His fingers caressed my neck, voice chillingly gentle. I tilted my head to kiss him. "No rush, the real show's just starting." The window rose, veiling the interior. 3 days later, Vivian's dirt exploded online. An anonymous post titled "Unmasking the Pure Maiden Vivian" included damning evidence, chat logs with 3 rich heirs simultaneously, pre-surgery photos, single eyelids, flat nose unrecognizable from her current self. An ex-boyfriend's video accused her of swindling his savings and vanishing. Most lethal was a recording with her confidant, Daniel. A moron. "Once I ruin Cecilia and snag the Sue fortune, I'll dump him." Seeing the news, Daniel stormed Vivian's apartment, slapping her publicly. "Wretch." Paparazzi caught it, rocketing it to trending. Late night on Soren's private island, I stood barefoot on the beach, reading Daniel's latest post. "Betrayed by my most trusted, I now see true love. Cecilia, I was wrong, come back?" Soren hugged me from behind, kissing me. Seems the lesson wasn't enough. After Vivian's expose, Daniel unraveled, posting a 3,000-word Facebook confession, weeping over her betrayal. "Cecilia, you're my only true love." I screenshotted it for the socialite group, captioning, "Crowdfund him a brain scan." The chat flooded with "ha ha ha." 3 days later, outside Moo Group HQ, I stepped out to a shocking sight. Daniel in a rumpled suit, holding wilted roses, standing in a giant candle heart, a banner behind him reading, "Cecilia, I was wrong, please come back." The security chief looked troubled. "Cecilia, we've chased him off thrice, he threatens to report us for violating his freedom." I rubbed my temples. "Call the police." 10 minutes later, sirens pierced the street. Pinned down, Daniel still bellowed, "Cecilia, I know you love me. You're just too shy to admit it." I stood on the steps, looking down. "Daniel, know what you resemble now?" He struggled to look up. "What?" "A stray dog." With that, I turned toward the waiting black Maybach. As the door opened, Soren's slender fingers extended, naturally taking my hand. Daniel's eyes bulged. "Soren, you stole my woman." Soren didn't turn, merely saying to the police, "He's mentally unstable, suggest medical care." A month later, the Sue family's bankruptcy hit financial headlines. Daniel's father allegedly embezzled funds for gambling, amassing huge debts. He's renting a basement in the South slums now. My assistant handed me a file. "Vivian's still with him." I raised an eyebrow. "She didn't flee?" "She did." The assistant stifled a laugh, but Daniel dragged her back, saying she ruined him and must take responsibility. I closed the file, a truly earth-shaking love story. 6 months later, in a cheap rental, "Can you fucking cook?" Daniel kicked over a plastic stool. "It's so salty trying to choke me." Vivian cowered in the corner, slap marks on her face. I followed the recipe. "Recipe my ass." Daniel smashed the plate. "I was blind to ditch Cecilia for a wretch like you." Vivian shrieked. "You think Cecilia would take you back? She's all lovey-dovey with Soren. Didn't you see last week's magazine? They're vacationing in the Maldives." Daniel raged, grabbing her hair and slamming her against the wall. "Shut up, wretch. It's all your fault." A neighbor yelled, "What's the racket at midnight? Keep it up, and I'll call the cops." They finally quieted. 3 months later, Vivian, fed up, secretly contacted an old rich acquaintance, a balding, pot-bellied man in his 50s, but free with money. She worked her charms in bed, securing his promise to keep her. But she never anticipated Daniel returning early as she packed to flee. Running? He blocked the door, eyes sinister. "Ruined me and think you can escape?" Vivian's legs buckled, kneeling. "Daniel, let me explain." He seized her hair, sneering. "Explain what? How you spread your legs for old men?" He pulled out his phone, playing a recording of Vivian with the rich man in a hotel. Her face turned ashen. "Why, you followed me?" "Followed?" Daniel sneered. "I fucking filmed it." He dragged her inside. "Since you love selling yourself, I'll make sure you get your fill." A month later, at a low-end club, Sister Wong, "This is our new gentleman, Daniel, the Madame Fond, a bit old, but skilled." A rich woman appraised him. "Decent looks, but his eyes are too fierce." Daniel swallowed his shame, forcing a smile. "Sister Wong, I'll serve you well." She frowned. "Wait, aren't you the Sue family's young master?" His face twisted. She burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha, karma. Your mom mocked me as nouveau riche, and now her son's licking my feet." She flung bills at his face. "Go on, bark like a dog." Daniel clenched his fists, but loosened them at the sight of cash. Woof. Meanwhile, on a Maldives private island, I lay in Soren's arms, scrolling to news of Daniel as a gigolo, laughing aloud. Soren snatched my phone, pinning me down. "Looking at other men?" He bit my lip. "You're only allowed to look at me." Waves lapped the beach, moonlight streamed through the window, casting entwined shadows on the wall.